Hi, this is Jessica Garcia with Brainstorming Women. Welcome to my conversation with Sheila Kreifels.
How are
Hi,
you?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing, Jessica?
Doing very well, thank you. Thanks for your time today. Sheila is a marriage and family therapist and a relationship coach, and we are going to have a conversation today.
Great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's good to get positive and accurate information out there.
Awesome. So Sheila, so tell me what you're seeing these days in the work that you do with your client.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting, obviously, with COVID-19. Originally, I felt like there was a high anxiety, as it all started, and people were like, wow, how is this going to impact me? Can I cope? What's going to
Mhm.
happen? A lot of questioning coming up. But interestingly enough, 4 weeks into North Carolina shut down, and 6 weeks into some other places that I work in globally, as a shutdown, people are feeling more sadness. It's a grief process at this point where, there's a little bit more depression, a little bit more feeling stuck, a little bit more feeling like, wow, how's this going to end? What now? What's going to happen? Who's leading us? So it's challenging, and I have a transition model that I always love to share with my clients. I'll hold it up for you all, and we can uh,
Ah,
put
yes,
put
we'll
it in
share
there.
that.
But it really, I think, helps people visually to begin to understand that whatever you're feeling is okay and normal, and it'll change. And there's a lot of questions that you might be asking yourself that other people are asking themselves too. And that everybody goes through change a little bit differently at their own time frame. But you're tasked with going through it. And some people, I mean, I'm working with some people who are in the process of a move during this time, or had lost a job before this, and so they're going through multiple changes, simultaneously. And I encourage people to really take time each day to do an emotional check-in. And a simple way of looking at that is I use just the primary emotions of mad, glad, sad, and afraid. Right? Most emotions come from those four primary emotions: mad, glad,
Glad,
mad,
glad,
glad, sad,
glad.
and afraid. Right? So you could feel frustrated, which would fit under mad, or angry. You might feel anxiety, which fits under fear, or maybe you're not sleeping well, which would be indicative of anxiety. And just
Mhm.
to daily go, what am I feeling? Maybe I'm feeling all those,
Mhm.
and to maybe just in your own mind or on a sheet of paper construct a simple sentence. I feel angry that I'm still out of work. I feel afraid that I don't know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
with my family or the future, or whatever's coming up. And it's not about sitting in the emotion then. So that what I love about the transition model is it helps people to understand that you change through it. Right? It's not about staying in depression, which is often what people fear. Like, I'm going to get stuck in sadness, or I'm going to get stuck with anxiety and feel it for months on end. But it's about feeling it and then deciding, how do I want to respond to it? Right? Taking some personal accountability toward deciding, how do I want to deal with the sadness that I feel today?
And Sheila, is it reasonable to think that perhaps folks might have be in different phases of that transition with different feelings that they're experiencing, whether it's job loss and struggles in a relationship or
Yeah,
other concerns that they have, like at different
absolutely.
places?
Absolutely. Everybody in a household might feel completely differently based upon their circumstances and where they're at. And, some people might stay in anxiety longer than sadness. Maybe they hit sadness and get out of that quick. Some people are feeling guilty, right? That's a strong emotion that comes up right now. Maybe they're guilty because they can't go visit their elderly parent right now, or they can't help somebody that they're used to helping, or do a particular job that they're used to doing. And so, there's a lot of different things that happen. And again, you can be feeling all of those things simultaneously. So it's not a linear process necessarily. It can be a very circular process where you go back to anxiety next week, and feeling like, can I cope again?
And so with all these feelings that one has, then we are living with our families or our partners, or we're 24/7 pretty much. So then it becomes, you have all this transition you're going through. And like you said, those that you're with are going through their own. So any suggestions in terms of maybe self-awareness, being aware that you're living this, and I mean, any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think it's important to do your own emotional check-in first. And then with my husband, every day we do a walk, usually at the end of the day, sometimes after dinner, sometimes before. And it really is about, feelings. It really is about, how are you doing today? And I'm mad about this, or I'm sad about this. And it's not about solutioning in that moment. It's not about trying to fix each other. It's about going, wow, okay, I see you in that emotion. I see why you're sad. I understand why you're sad, and
Like that.
yeah, and empathy, right? It's about stepping in each other's shoes, even if it's different, even if
So
we're
it's
at
like a
different places.
daily check-in that you do.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And so it gives you the opportunity to feel heard, be seen by somebody else. And, you could do it with a girlfriend, or an adult child, if you like, or, a lot of people, right? You can kind of sit down and just check in emotionally. And, I think the tough piece for people is, one is that, we see feeling our feelings as weak, right? As opposed to as courageous and strong. And then we don't know what to do with them, And so people fear having them and bringing them into present self-awareness, and then going, oh my gosh, what do I do now? Right? I'm feeling down, or I'm feeling anxious. And so it's then taking that next step to ask, how do I want to respond to this? Not react. That's what we do when conflict arises and things get not so healthy at home, is we're reactive to our emotions. We're acting them out, as opposed to understanding them and saying, how am I going to process through this? What do I need from you to help me?
That makes me think of the word boundaries as you're saying that.
That's a good word. Yeah, that's a good word, right? I like to say it I do use a lot of boundaries, but I also like to say it, which is more visual for people, because people get confused about what boundaries really are. They're not walls to keep you separate from people, but I'll say, stay in your own lane, right? Monitor your own feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. Don't project them or emerge into somebody else's lane with them, and cast a wide net, but stay in with yourself. You can share them, you can ask for support, you can let people know what you need, but they're still yours to deal with. And that's hard for a lot of people, because often in couplehood, we assign our partner as the fixer of our emotions, right? We're like, hey, you're responsible for my anxiety. If you would do this, this, and this, I wouldn't feel anxious.
Wow.
There's no truth to that, but it happens all the time.
Wow. Speaking of couples, I am a big fan of the Gottman Institute, and
Me too.
I love it. And one of the articles I was reading, which has been a while, I've been aware of the Four Horsemen, but I would love to hear your thoughts on along those lines, and those Four Horsemen, and some ideas around that, what they are.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's beautiful stuff. I mean, I love John Gottman too. He's a really, really sweet man. And pretty much almost every couple that I see is caught in the Four Horsemen. That's generally what drives people into counseling, because it's so uncomfortable. So the Four Horsemen that he talks about are criticism, okay, defensiveness, avoidant, or I think he calls it stonewalling. I just call it avoiding, right? Running out the door, and contempt. Okay.
Yeah.
And if we really truly evaluate it, there's hardly a person out in our culture that doesn't do one or multiple of those things in a conversation at some point. And so what he really is focused on is if you are like a tennis match, somebody swats across the net some criticism, even if that person just perceives it as criticism, they then get defensive, right? And then there's this avoidance as the conflict rises and tensions grow. Somebody slams the door and walks out, and doesn't want to talk about it. And then there's the heavy sigh and roll of the eyes of contempt, right? And it can happen really quickly. It can be a 30-second conversation or a 30-year-long problem that isn't solved in a relationship. But every time we go through that, and I'm gonna be honest, I go through it with my husband at times. We don't feel good. When you feel contempt, that's like, hatred for your spouse, right? Sitting in disrespect. And so it doesn't feel good to be on either end of that, and what happens is then it erodes. If we stay in that kind of communication regularly, it erodes the emotional safety of the relationship, and we begin to emotionally distance and disconnect. Right?
And one of the things that I think we touched on at some point before was about how perception is reality. So self-awareness becomes important, because you may be giving that off without realizing it.
Absolutely. I used to laugh because in my early marriage, my husband used to say, "It's not what you're saying, it's how you say it." And I would always be like, "What do you mean? I don't get it." And then he would get defensive, and his defensiveness really irritated me. And I thought it was about him. And I finally was like, oh, he hears what I'm saying as critical. That's what's making him defensive, right? Mm-hmm. So if we begin to understand that we often create in our partner the very thing we don't like. I'm not liking his defensiveness. He's not liking my criticism, right? Or what he hears as criticism or attack. And then we kind of go into that cycle. And so a simple solution that I embraced was just using iMessages. Instead of saying, you didn't take out the garbage, or you didn't do this, I would say, gosh, I'm feeling a little anxious about the housework not being completed in our house.
Actually, that's what was in the article, examples of I statements to use.
Yeah. Just simply taking ownership of my feeling in that moment, anxious, sad, happy, mad, glad, sad, afraid, and calling it what it is and owning it and expressing it as my emotion. Funny thing is, this is what I've experienced with majority of men who I've had the wonderful opportunity to work with. Mm-hmm. Most men absolutely want to please their significant other or spouse. So when we say, I'm feeling this way, I could use your help, boom, they're right there. It's in their DNA. But if we say, why haven't you taken out the trash? What's wrong with you?
You never. Yeah.
Yeah. Then it becomes an attack. And they're like, gosh, I'm trying to do my best and I can't be good enough in this relationship. Right. So it makes them feel like a failure. And same thing for us as women. But women aren't as quick to jump on that really wanting to take care of their spouse. Men just have that in their DNA, and it's a beautiful thing to witness. So I love to tell women, use your power. We're so powerful when we communicate in kind ways,
Very nice. I love that. So the 4 are contempt,
criticism. It starts with criticism.
Okay.
And then, or sounds like criticism, right? An attack of sorts, a you message. Then the other person, anybody that ever hears a you message is going to feel defensive. Even if they act on it or not, we're going to go, what?
Yeah, because your guard is up.
Yeah, it's somebody projecting onto you, and that never feels good. So defensiveness is going to happen. And then often when it starts to feel that conflictual, there's a lot of people who are going to want to avoid the conflict. So then the avoidance dance starts, where we're like, uh-oh, this is getting really ugly. I'm out, right? As opposed to trying to work it through. And then there's contempt. People are very unsatisfied and disrespectful. And I tell my clients, your partner's no longer their friend, they're a foe. Because in conflict, our biology says fight or flight, right? And for men in particular, they become warriors. They're warriors internally. Sometimes avoidance, I tell my clients, if you need to avoid and walk away, please do, because you have to deflood emotionally, at
Deflood.
least be at
Wow,
at least be at
quite a
a
word.
yellow rather than a red light, to kind of come back to have a rational conversation and solve conflict,
Very
work
nice.
through conflict and repair it, which John Gottman, he really discovered the most significant thing, I think, in the profession, and that is that conflict is not what disturbs relationships or hurts marriages. It's how we do it, and it's repairing it that is the significant piece. Often if you're in this cycle of criticism, defensive, stonewall, contempt, then you're never resolving anything. And what happens is, if you think about it, when we as couples problem solve together and resolve something, we feel an incredible bond, right? It feels, wow, we can accomplish anything, and it bonds us. So if we're always in a cycle of communication where we don't get that experience, it distances us. It doesn't bond us. So it's the conflict repair that we're interested in.
I love it. Gosh, this is great information, Sheila.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Yeah, I get excited about it too.
So finally, I'm guessing you're seeing some, like we talked before, some emerging concerns that are conflicting or that are all there. Like we
Yeah,
said in the beginning, that you were saying how the transition process, you can be in different places for different fears or concerns that you're having.
yeah,
And I know we touched on that about, your economics and the fear of
yeah.
getting sick.
Yeah, it's
So
it's it's interesting, and again, everybody's gonna feel these quadrants a little differently, right? So most importantly, I just feel like this is a time of really giving people grace. Really, I know my older daughter, she's struggling, and sometimes it frustrates me because I'm like, get over it, like cope, right? I mean, I sometimes feel that way inside myself,
easy
like,
to
hey,
say.
you've got a roof over your head, you got a family that loves you, like this is gonna be okay. But still, I got to step into her shoes and realize that, she's a 22-year-old that just ventured out for 8 months in Nashville on her own and created a life for herself. And now it's, folding, and that's hard. And
Yeah.
so her concerns are going to be different than my concerns. And so really giving each other that space. And so I think that there's three things that I've seen on Facebook that are going around, but I add a fourth. And the three things are that absolutely people are fearful for their health with a horrible virus that we know a lot about. And so, there's going to be those people who just focus in on that and want everything shut down till that thing is gone, right? And then there's the economic piece. For many people, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I work with the wealthiest of wealthy, and I work with the poorest of the poor. And I'm telling you, everybody has fears economically. Doesn't matter where you are socioeconomically. But, if you're paycheck to paycheck, that's going to be more substantial and difficult at this time than if you are a Fortune 500 person. But economically, people are concerned. They're concerned. I have a friend or a family friend who's a pig farmer in Nebraska, and he wrote a big note about, what they're having to do with the pigs because of the supply chain, and the meat packing places shut down and the slaughterhouse is shut down, and they're raising all these pigs and they don't have a space or ability to feed them right now. And it's like, wow, what are we supposed to do? And so, those are some economic concerns that some of us don't even think about. We're
Yeah.
not close to that. So everybody's dealing with that, and then you have the political concerns or the power grabs or how much control the government has. And there's many people, concerned about that, hence the protests that have been going on. But I also add to that. So those are the three things that you see a lot of, in the diagram that's circling out there. But I add, the mental and emotional concerns of people. I mean, it's heightened, and, people are learning to manage emotions and manage, their mental health. And if you've had mental health issues to begin with, this can exacerbate them in that way. And, so that to me is important too. We don't talk as much about it, but I think it's so significant. And you bring up the self-awareness. You know, the needs that I focus on with clients are that we all have legitimate physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual needs, and to tap into those, just like you do the emotional check-in, mad, glad, sad, and afraid, to every day check in with, how am I taking care of my physical needs? You know, am I eating healthy? Am I working out? You know, am I walking when I need to? Am I not sitting as much? It's problematic right now. People are sitting in front of a screen a lot, right? You know, how am I taking care of my emotional needs? Am I reaching out? Do I feel a connectedness and a sense of belonging? You know, and do I feel loved no matter, you know, what's going on, and accepted with the emotions that I'm having? And then, you know, mental needs. How are we learning? How are we growing? You know, you brought up a really good point earlier where you said, I'm keeping busy focusing on my business structure, right? So you're learning. Some of us are learning new technologies because we have to. And that ability to meet that mental need of learning and growing is incredibly helpful now. And then, of course, spiritual. I think that there's a huge movement towards spirituality in the culture anyway. And, you know, to be able to tap into that, no matter what your belief is, maybe it's time to just say, what do I believe? You know, maybe you've never thought about that. Yeah. And now you can. Or if you are a believer of sorts, use that. You know, maybe you have a little spiritual ritual you begin to do each day. And so those needs, as we balance those and really understand what they are in our lives and work at doing them, you just become more balanced and more resilient. And that's helpful during these tough times.
I think sometimes it's harder than one might imagine.
Good point. Yes, you're absolutely right. And the truth is, majority of people aren't even clear what their needs are, and we often don't express them to ourselves or others. So you're absolutely right. It is baby steps. And so maybe today just gives you the opportunity to say, wow, at least I have a way to say, okay, I have physical needs, I have emotional needs, I have mental needs, and I have spiritual needs. What are they? Let me begin to discover that. And that's okay. Because most people, you know, we don't think about our own needs that often. We're often focused on others. And so, you know, it's a good self-awareness exercise to just begin to ask that question and see what emerges. You know?
Awesome. I love it. I'm not sure if you heard, but I was saying what a pleasure it is to get to speak to you each time that I speak with you. I do miss our coffees together.
I know, me too. Soon, huh?
Yeah, hopefully. So thank you. I would love to hear how I can get in touch with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Probably the best way is through my website at www.sheilakreifels.com, Kreifels, and or at 919-296-1546 is my local number.